Hi guys, good afternoon. It's Doc Kyle again. So this afternoon we're gonna talk about the bone marrow. The bone marrow is the primary site in adults for hematopoiesis, and hematopoiesis, in simpler terms, just simply means formation of blood cellular components, no, blood cellular components. To so so the blood cell population is very labile in a sense that it's not in a constant concentration, kumbaga, no. So when there are needs, example, um your patient is hypoxic, your body is hypoxic, the body realizes this and produces more red blood cells. And if there is an infection, we need more soldiers to fight the pathogens. So the body will stimulate the bone marrow to produce more white blood cells, no. So always remember that your blood cells, except for your memory T and B cells, no, of the lymphoid cells, no, they have a relatively short lifespan in a sense that once they do their purpose, once what they do what's needed of them, they will die. So it's part of their life na. It's they have a predestined death, kumbaga. So what are the sites for hematopoiesis? In order, so remember that before you were born, if you were still a fetus, your body is really different from the adult body that you have right now. So the needs, the environment, and the oxygen tension is different from the adult body. So in a sense that we also need to have a set of blood cells that are more capable in doing their jobs um, in that environment. So that is why the fetal yolk sac is in charge for making this fetal blood cells. No, so we can see that in our erythrocytes, our red blood cells, there are what we call fetal hemoglobins, and they are more accustomed in gathering oxygen in the environment of the fetus, no, because we still don't use our lungs yet in the fetal stage, no. So what happens? So this type of hemoglobin is more efficient in gathering oxygen, distributing it within the fetal body inside the placenta, no. So next is the liver. Remember, the liver is also a prenatal source for your um, fetal hemoglobins, no. So the fetal yolk sac and the liver. At the same time, the bone marrow starts already is starting to make blood cells while still in the fetal stage, but it only transitions to become the major player in your hematopoiesis after you are born. So remember that the bone marrow ramps up its production of blood cells during birth and up to end of time until mamatay na ka, no? So the bone marrow produces this adult type of hemoglobin, our adult hemoglobin A1, no, and A2, and these types of hemoglobin are the more efficient type of hemoglobin that can carry your oxygen in a state na we are doing our oxygenation on our own. We're using our lungs. We don't have an umbilical cord na. So this is a very efficient type of hemoglobin. But if or your bone marrow or your hemoglobin itself, no, the genes that are responsible for encoding the hemoglobin, the globin portion of your the protein portion of your hemoglobin are somewhat disturbed, like example, nagka fibrosis imuhang bone marrow, di na ako makaproduce og red blood cells, then your body, um, with the notion na hypoxic na ka, you have very poor oxygen saturation, it will revert back to your liver to produce these red blood cells. But remember that the red blood cells produced by your liver might are more of katong they produce more of a natal katang fetal na hemoglobin, no, so they're not very efficient. So kato no. So, kato. Next is... So, this is the table that will show the activity of the hematopoiesis, no? Not necessarily in the bone marrow lang. So, as you can see, in your first 2.5 months of life as a fetus, hematopoiesis occurs in the yolk sac. You know? The yolk sac is the conceptum. No? It's more primitive pa na it's a butiki pa. Not yet siguro a butiki, but before that. Then eventually, as you develop your visceral organs, as you develop your liver and your spleen, they tend to take over hematopoiesis, no? No? So after when they take over your hematopoiesis, like I said earlier, they produce your fetal hemoglobins, no? In your fetal na mga red blood cell, fetal na mga WBCs. And then at the 4th month, your bone marrow starts to produce your hematopoiesis. This occurs no due to the development of the organ pod. So, in the beginning, yolk sac lang jud ang in charge of making hematopoiesis because your liver and your spleen hasn't developed pa. They're still rudimentary. But once they have the ability now to excuse me, to synthesize, they take over na. So that's why your bone marrow didn't start immediately because your skeletal system is still developing pamampod. So once your skeletal system is mature enough until eventually you are born, the bone marrow takes over. So here your long bones, your tibia and femur, are the ones that are the main productive, the main areas for hematopoiesis, no? When you're still young. So eventually, when you get older, it's your more of the flat bones na. So your vertebra, sternum, and rib. Sternum and rib pala mga flat bone. Pati ang vertebra po, maybe sa tips. So what we have here is the erythropoiesis. No? So this is just the nomenclature, no? Erythropoiesis, formation of red blood cells. Granulopoiesis, formation of granulocytes. We have two types of WBCs, diba? The granulocytes and agranulocytes are lymphocytes and are monocytes for the agranulocytes. So, and then thrombopoiesis, formation of platelets. No, so what is this pluripotent hematopoietic stem cell? No? So the pluripotent stem cell is a stem cell that can be anything it wants. No, it can be a granulocyte or a granulocyte or a megakaryocyte for platelets. But this pluripotent stem cell is stimulated by the needs of the body. Example. We go back to that example I said earlier that if you're hypoxic, no, okay hangin, okay oxygen, then your body will inform the bone marrow to stimulate these pluripotent hematopoietic stem cells to become erythrocytes, no, or erythroprogenitor cells, no, because the next step from your pluripotent hematopoietic stem cell is your progenitor cells, no. And then these progenitor cells will eventually become your specific na mga cells. This will become your neutrophils, your lymphocytes, no? So your pluripotent hematopoietic stem cell doesn't directly go become an erythrocyte. Everything in our body, for the most part, is sequential. So it needs to have steps, no? And as you can see in this table here, so this is the multipotential, no? It's same like multi and pluri is the same lang, no? So what will happen, this is the pluripotential. It can be anything. It can be a erythrocyte or a lymphocyte. But what happens with it when it becomes a progenitor na, there is no more turning back, no? Once you become a progenitor cell here, like progenitor cell, this is your progenitor cells naman, no? There is no turning back. So if you become the lymphoid progenitor, you can no longer be a myeloid progenitor. No? So you can only be a B or T lymphocyte, no? No? If you're a common lymphoid progenitor, and if you're a myeloid progenitor, the thing with the myeloid progenitor is you can be the rest of the cells, blood cells, no? You can be an erythrocyte, you can be a megakaryocyte, you can be a mast cell, myeloblast, which can become your granulocytes, no? So, and your monocytes, no? So, the basis for the two types of WBCs is the granules, no? But that doesn't mean na same sila og progenitor cell, like your monocytes are considered a granulocyte. So, but your but the origin of your monocyte is in with the myeloid, no? So, different jud. Ang lymphoid, progenitor lymphoid lang jud yung ma-produce, and then your myeloid is kato. Kato sila tanan everything else, no? So, the next, so progenitor cells, no? So, erythroid lineage, thrombocytic lineage, mga progenitor cells nila sila, no? So, they are also known as your colony-forming units, no? So, this colony, same with bacteriology, colony is just a collection of the same bacteria, no? Or the same fungi, or the same cells, colony. Mo lang dyan na sila. No? So, from your pluripotential or multipotential, becomes a progenitor cells, no? Progenitor cell. But, so, if I ask you what is the stimulus, no? For stimulating your stem cells, it's the need of the body, Jude. No, what is the need, the current need of the body? Because remember, that's the beauty of the bone marrow or the hematologic system in general. That it's very labile, no? So whatever the body needs, it tries to compensate dayon. So another example here is a stem cell. So it can be anything. It can be a specialized cell. It can be anything cell. So what will happen? This is the type of mitosis that a stem cell has, no? So a stem cell will divide, will undergo mitosis, but the first daughter cell, no, the product of that mitosis is a stem cell gyapon. Why is that? So that dili ma the population will not be consumed, no? So nadyo kay steady population of stem cells na kay preserve, no? And then the other one becomes a specialized cell. Unlike your progenitor cells, once mag-divide sila, both of the daughters become specialized cells, Jude. No? Walay mabilin. That's why the stem cells are the only one replenishing, the population of your blood cells, no? So your progenitor cells are not the ones replenishing. They are just a step, no? They are just the progenitors of the entire lineage. They are not the ones replenishing, ha? Okay, good. Sige. So this is another table. So this is your pluripotential, no? Kanina multipotential. And it becomes a myeloid. It can be anything it wants. And then the lymphoid. So B, T, and your natural killer, your CD16. No? Alright. So the bone marrow consists of the red bone marrow, which contains the hematopoietic cells, no? From your stem cells to your maturing neutrophils, your progenitor cells, everything is in there. The yellow bone marrow is filled up with adipocytes. So what's the purpose of these adipocytes? No, they tend to fill in the gaps between the red bone marrow, and then they have this function of added protection, especially pag maalog, maalog na, not necessarily mechanical trauma, but remember your stem cells are quite fragile, so they need some kind of buffer, no? Nice soft soft protection around them. And apart from that, they can tap into those adipocytes for energy, no? They can convert the fat to energy because, well, not necessarily directly, but because remember that mitosis, there is a lot of mitosis in the bone marrow from the stem cells producing your progenitor cells, no? there is a lot of mitosis, and mitosis is a very energy hungry process. No, we really need to have lots of energy. So maybe they can tap that adipocytes, no, for energy. So when you're young, the bone marrow consists of mainly red blood cells. No? So why is that? Because your bones are quite small pa. No, it's really small. So there's no space pa for adipocytes pa kayo. So, but when you grow older, the red bone marrow decreases and is replaced by the yellow bone marrow. Um, this here is quite when you think about it, the capacity of your red bone marrow to produce to produce your cells for hematopoiesis, no, yung function for hematopoiesis doesn't decrease when you grow older. Just so happens that the bone gets bigger, and then your red marrow is more efficient in producing cells, no? So it doesn't need to take that lot of space na. That's why it decreases. And apart from that, so your yellow bone marrow is the one that protects it lagi. So kanito inyong ginasup-sup sa bulalo, no? Katong ilo. Pero ginastro-stro pa ninyo. Pa ninyo. Mao na siya tong yellow bone marrow, no? Yung sinusup-sup. No? So there is also a stroma which supports the hematopoietic islands, no? So over here, you can see this little alien here, no? This red little alien. Every part of the bone is consisting of red marrow, while here the adult happy lagi sila, no? Smile sila ba? While here it only consists of your ribs, your sternum, your pelvis, and tips of the ends of your femur. So this is your fat, and these are your hematopoietic cells. Huh? Kanito, lami kanyo sa bulalo ba? Anyway, this is another picture. One thing about fats is they are not miscible. They are not. They don't mix well with water. No. So what happens if there's fat and then you process it for making slides? No, this is a slide, man. It tends to get washed out. No, and then because it doesn't mix well with water, and unlike your cellular components, which mixes well with water, and the stains and the fixatives, they tend to stick on the slide, and then that's why your adipose tissue is usually just blanks, no, hollow out, because they tend to get washed out, no, during processing. Ito. So these are your adipose, no? And then the fat, no? And then these are your hematopoietic cells, no? So red blood cells. So what is the red blood cell? No, the red blood cell is this one. It's a biconcave disc, and it is anucleate, meaning wala siya nucleus, no? And ngano wala siya nucleus? So I believe in the principle that function follows follows function. Form follows function. So in the body, it's rare na tay mga organs mga wala goy pulos good oy na alam, but maybe sa una na siya pulos, and then we don't know if karon we don't know the body pa man good kaayo all that much. So the erythrocyte is one of the most studied, no? So kabalo taon sa iyang purpose. And the only purpose of the erythrocyte is to carry your hemoglobin. Your hemoglobin is composed of your heme, Heme, and your globin, meaning the globin, the protein part of your hemoglobin. No? So your heme is composed of your iron and your protoporphyrin 9. So in the hemoglobin, the heme portion binds to your oxygen. No? So this is the oxygen binding portion. So in general, your hemoglobin is the oxygen binding component, no, of your blood, of your red blood cell. And the purpose of this red blood cell is just to carry this oxygen around the organs. So given that it's mao to yung trabaho, you just so kato kabalo na ta sa endpoint niya. So going back, we can explain why it doesn't need a nucleus. Because what is the purpose of the nucleus? So we go back here sa hemocytoblast. No? So in a stem cell, what is the purpose of the stem cell? The purpose of the stem cell is just to mitosis and to the purpose of a stem cell is just to become. Meaning to become, it just needs to mature. Mao lang jud ang goal. To mature, develop itself to become a mature cell. So the purpose of the stem cell is to divide and then become. Divide and then become. So it has two jobs. Number one, mitosis, no, and number two is to mature. So in mitosis, you really need a lot of proteins, and you really need to duplicate your genetic material, your DNA and RNA. No, given that premise, those conditions, those qualifiers, its function is to mitosis, no, and mature. It needs a big nucleus, because the big nucleus pertains that the genes, the chromosomes are active. No? If the chromosomes are active, meaning there are multiple protein synthesis. No, there is protein synthesis present. Mitosis is a very protein consumptive, protein utilizing process. No, so you really need to make lots of proteins during mitosis. That's why the nucleus is big. Another thing is you really need to divide your genetic material. That's why it's really when you see immature cells, that's their job. No, the nuclei, most of the time, their nucleus is very big, but their cytoplasm is quite small pa, no, because they don't have a lot of intracytoplasmic proteins. They are yet to build it pa, no, they are yet to build it. So majority of the action occurs in the nucleus because they are still stimulating protein synthesis. They're still planning pa, no, they're still initiating. So as you get more mature, no, after you undergo mitosis and you go more mature, the machinations of creating protein synthesis becomes apparent when the cytoplasm gets bigger, no? So when the cytoplasm gets bigger, meaning you are creating more intracytoplasmic proteins, and then when the nucleus gets smaller, meaning the chromosomes are beginning to compact, meaning they are beginning to compact, meaning dili na sila, their priority is not mitosis anymore. So because that's not their job na, they're done with mitosis na. They're just doing it for maturation. So what happens is they only leave the uncoiled chromosomes, no, the active chromosomes, the euchromatin, to create the proteins needed, no. So in the RBC, the proteins needed for maturation is hemoglobin, no. So as magkadaghan iyang hemoglobin, magkadako pud iyahang cytoplasm. And eventually, the cytoplasm becomes filled up with hemoglobin, and then it can sustain its own without a nucleus. Eventually, it will remove the nucleus, no? Because number one, it doesn't need to undergo mitosis anymore. It just needs to carry the hemoglobin. The added benefit of removing the nucleus is now we have a biconcave disc, no? This biconcave disc is very moldable, no? It can creep its way in very tiny, small diameter capillaries in the sinuses of the spleen, in the Bowman's capsule of the kidney. It can worm its way, kumbaga, no, in tight spaces. But think of because if you have a nucleus as big as this, I don't think you can pass through those capillaries. So that's one added benefit. Another thing is so that's maturation, ha. So in more simpler terms, if the cell is more immature and it is more immature and mitotically active, then it has a big nucleus. If it is more mature, then the cytoplasm is mature cells tend to have a larger cytoplasm and a more smaller nuclei. In the case of the erythrocytes, wala na siya nucleus, no? So, remember that we have in the histopathology section, no? We're making slides, no? We have two stains. We have our hematoxylin and we have our eosin, HNE stain. Our hematoxylin is an alkaline stain. Alkaline meaning it has a pH. It has a pH of greater than 7, no? So it binds to acid components in the cell. So this hematoxylin stain, if we apply it to our tissue in our bone marrow, it will stick to the components that has lots of acids, which is our nucleus, which contains lot of DNA, no? Acid man ang A sa tungoy, ug RNA, no? Acid man po na. So that's why the color of the hematoxylin stain is violet, no? Blue, purple, basta ana na spectrum. So that's why our nucleus stains purple. And the cytoplasm is an acidic stain, no? And it is color pink or red, kumbaga, no? So it binds to alkaline, no? Mga compound, no, in the body. And most of our proteins in the body is alkaline. That's why the RBC is red, because it has a lot of hemoglobin, and the globin component is alkaline. That's why eosin binds to it. No, that's why it's red erythrocyte. No? So, kato, good. So hopefully you understood it. But remember that your proteins can be both alkaline or acidic based on their solution pod, no? They both have an amino terminal group and a carboxylic group, no? No? So kato, so this is another maturation of your red blood cell. So basophilic. So that's why it's still called basophilic. Basophil. So there isn't basophilic. Wala pa kayo siya unsa, wala pa kay dagan pa siya RNA. No, wala pa kayo siya. There's still a lot of RNA here in the cytoplasm. That's why the stain binds to it pa. There's not a lot of hemoglobin pa. Eventually, the RNA will get mixed with the hemoglobin. That's why polychromatophilic na siya. Daghan na siya color. There's both blue and a reddish color. Dili kaya siya ma-represent here. But ang ending ana, may mo na siyang orthochromatophilic, meaning is just mostly red. No? Eosinophilic staining na siya. So, tanggal lang nucleus. And then the reticulocyte, that's why it's called reticulocyte, because there is still mRNA na bilin there. So, napay mga colored here. Oh. These are your reticulocytes. Napay mga polyribosomes, no? Stain for RNA. So, I don't expect you to know the minutia, no? Aning topic na ni, but I want you to memorize at least the kanang this mga types maturation steps kani sila mga polychromatophilic kana, because we will, if especially if I'm gonna be your teacher in Hema, we will dig in deep jud. Aning magtigi jud ani nila, no? So granulocytes, granulocytes are the your Ben man sila, no? Ben, your basophils, eosinophils, and your neutrophils, no? And LM, your granulocytes is your lymphocytes and your monocytes. No? So granulocytes, they just have granules, in a sense, no? What is the purpose of these granules? We will talk about it later, but look at this wonderful GIF that I have. GIF, sorry, meaning, sabay po pronounce na. Now, these are your bacteria. They look like, staph ba na? Strep ata, kay enchains man. This is kanisha, this one that's eating them is maybe it's a neutrophil. Yeah, I think it's a neutrophil. No? That is phagocytosis. No? Phagocytosis simply means to eat. No, you eat, cellular eating. No, so kauniya na siya. And then after eating, you can see that they are placed in like mga vacuole. No, magibutang sila isa ka putos na dako. No, so what happens when they get into that putos after they eat? That's your phagosome, no? And then your lysosomes, no? Your lysosomes contain your mga reactive oxygen species. They bind to it. Nari na susulod sa phagosome ng mga bacteria, and then they bind to it, no? The lysosomes bind to the phagosome, so that's your phagolysosome now. Additionally, your granules bind to that. No? So what happens is when your lysosomes bind to it, it opens and it releases all those reactive oxygen species, yung mga hydrogen peroxide, superoxide, no? And then your granules attach to the lysosome, phagosome also, and it releases its contents. All the contents of your granules are to, number one, destroy the bacteria. Number two, to destroy the bacteria na ilahang giphagocytize, ikaw nila. There are also mga components that will aid in the clotting, inflammation, but granules are the storage for the proteins that affect that dictate the effect or the function of your granulocytes, no? Even your monocytes, no? So in RBC maturation, our basis for the maturation of your RBCs, di ba? The filling up of the hemoglobin, no, ma-full up na ang whole cytoplasm sa RBC. But in WBC, it is the formation of your granules, because like I said earlier, these granules are the ones that dictate the function of the granulocyte, no? Because they are the ones that contain the chemicals that do the function of the granulocyte. So you have the promyelocyte here. So in the case of the neutrophils, all of these granules they have a specific job in breaking down or killing the bacteria or pathogen, no? It has a vast array. Dagan kayo siya, di ba? Dagan kayo ni siya. No? Dagan kayo ni siya. But not all binds to the phagosome. Some are released in a nearby area, no? So some act as like chemokines. But in a sense that it all facilitates the total function of the neutrophil, which is to guard the body against intruders or pathogens, no? So like I said earlier, the same principle. When it's still immature, like the blast, it still has a big nucleus, but eventually when it in the neutrophil gets smaller and it becomes multilobulated, no? Why is that? No, because the neutrophils are the first responders. Unlike your erythrocytes, your RBCs, the neutrophils have more function, kumbaga, no? They have more responsibilities. So they need to keep their nucleus because they need to produce more proteins, no? So they need to produce more proteins while circulating. So they need to have their nuclei, but it's multilobulated because many lobules because um, so that it can pass through the crevices, no gyapon. That's the point. To pass through the crevices, the basement membrane, to undergo diapedesis. No, that's why it has a multilobulated. Because if it's just one big blob like this, it's really hard. But if it's small, no, and multilobulated, it can be it can pass through easier. Think of a snake that is 1 ton in weight, and elephant 1 ton in weight, who can pass through a 1 foot diameter hole. No, makasulod yun ang halas, no? But ang elephant, hindi nyo kasulod, no? Even though they have the same weight, no? So, same here, the genetic component needed to produce adequate amounts of protein is still there. Wala nagmaba ang iyang genetic material. No? So, kato lang, gi-lobulate lang siya para mas makaagi og properly. So, like I said, I want you to memorize the steps, no, in the promyelocyte, what granules are there na over here. So, kato. So, what is the purpose, no? Why do we need to another thing manggod especially in leukemia is what is leukemia? It is it's the cancer of blood cells. Kana tong word sa akong mama sa una katong bata pa kay usa ng leukemia mo na cancer na sa dugo. Well, which is true. It holds its own it's cancer sa blood in a sense na malignancy siya sa blood. So, malignancy sa blood meaning it has an uncontrollable division, no? Uncontrollable division. So, like I said in the nucleus topic, pag daghan kag mga immature looking cells dagkog nucleus, most probably malignan siya. So, what happens manggod kay in leukemia, kaning myeloblast, sometimes daghan lang kayo siya mag-divide, no? Daghan lang siya kaayo mag-divide and it becomes too much of a burden na sa lawa sa tao. Sige siya divide kay naangol iyahang genetics, naangol iyahang mga stop signal. So sige na siya divide, nahimo na siya leukemia kay sige siya divide kaning myeloblast. So kato, no, even though 10 million imuhang WBC count, dili gihapon siya makapatay og kagaw kay dili pa man siya prepared, myeloblast pa lang man siya, wala pa man siya yung mga kaning mga granules na mature, no? So, wala siya pulos, dagan lang siya, ginapaklag lang niya yung imong blood vessels, hindi lagi siya makaagi-agi kaayo because the nucleus is big and they're fragile, no? So, it's really not good. What happens in leukemia manggod? We can catch them in stages, no? So, what if myeloblast, nag-develop siya into promyelocyte, but sige lang siya develop in promyelocyte, and then we can classify that as a promyelocytic na leukemia. If maabot na siya sa myelocyte, mao na siyang myelocytic leukemia. We'll talk about this more in hema. Basta my point is in leukemia is we can catch certain type of leukemias if unsay population sa blood cells ang nag-predominate. For example, majority na mga leukemioid cells na myelocytic stage, so we can say it's a myelocytic leukemia, no? So di na ako na siya pangutana. Ano siya, basahin niyo yan please. And then so that's not important. So this is one of the more importanter na topic, no? So we have usually I just use 3 populations, but kani siya 4 ang iyahang gamit, so we can still use this. So these are the 4 populations of your neutrophils. So the first population is the maturing type in your bone marrow. And the second, no, kani pa itong mga metamyelocyte, mga promyelocyte, ni sila nag-mature pa nila. Wa pa ni sila pulos, no? Nag-divide pa ni sila, nagapadaghan pa ni sila. And number 2 is your storage. Kanitong mga mature na neutrophils o mga granulocytes na kanang ready to war na sila, fight. Pwede na sila bagay atong bacteria, pwede na nila kaunon. But, what happens, stay lang sila sa barracks, kay chill pa man sila. Di pa man sila need, there is still no need for them to go out. So, they just act as a buffer, no? So, and then the next is we have our marginating cells. These marginating cells are over here. This is the blood vessel, no? Mga marginating cells na to, nara sila din skilled sa blood vessel, nakatambay lang sila. Like, they're like the outpost, gani. Kita mo ng mga police outpost, no? And then your circulating cells are your mga nakapatrol na police, no? So, of course, when your circulating cells encounter the pathogen, mas dali itawag ang marginating ang mga nasa marginating lang na population. Nya kung dili jud makaya, magtawag na sila dito sa storage. Nya kung dili nila jud kaya, so no, since nagtawag na sila sa storage, if moabot sa point that they need to call on to take from the storage population sa neutrophils sa bone marrow, it means that the entire population is insufficient, no? There is still a need. So that's why there is a storage population to act as a buffer, kumbaga, no? So while nagakuha sila sa storage population, double time na ang production sa imuhang bone marrow na mitosis, no, for your neutrophils. Okay, hopefully nag-gets wrap. So your monocytes are your big boys, no? So your monocytes, they act the same as your neutrophils. But when they are still a monocyte, they can't phagocytose pa. They need to get to the tissue and activate there. Once they get to the tissue, for example, dinhi nakasama dinhi, puno pa neutrophils tanan, nagnana na siya, no? So your pus composed of dead and dying neutrophils that have ingested bacteria and also fibrin, no? So nana siya diha, ginahulat pa niya monocyte. So in your blood naga-travel ang monocyte in your blood, dili pa na siya capable of phagocytosis, no? But once naabot na siya dinhi, kung asa siya needed, mag-activate na siya, mahimo na siyang macrophage. Kusog kay na siya mukaon. Isa na siya ang pinakakusog mukaon. No, your macrophage. So, kato. So, monocyte, mahimong macrophage. So, your lymphocytes. So, we will just gloss over this because heavy ni sila sa hema, and this is still histo pa man. So, your lymphocytes, that's why they're called lymphocytes, because they are commonly seen in your lymph tissue, your lymph nodes and your lymphoid vessels, no? Especially in your lymph nodes. So your BNT lymphocytes are called BNT because they mature in your lymphocytes. All your lymphocytes are produced in the bone marrow, ha. It's just that the B lymphocytes mature in the bone marrow. And the T lymphocytes mature in the thymus, no? Yan na siya si NK. So your B lymphocytes are in the humoral activity, no? So immunity. They are the ones in charge in maturing into your plasma cell. And then your plasma cell is the one in charge of producing your antibodies, while your T lymphocytes in the cellular immunity, no? So you can have T helper, no, or cytotoxic T cell, no? So you have Th1, Th2, Th17, and then your natural killers. So this is the non-specific, it's against your cancer cells and infected cells. So your lymphocytes kill pathogens or tumor cells not via phagocytosis, no? they employ, like ato, like sa lymphocytes, they employ antibodies, no, which act as opsonins for, and in the case of your cytotoxin, no, it has this what you call as kiss of death, no. So dili magdikit lang siya, mapatay na to, maglice na to, mag-cytolysis na tong unsa tong tumor cell. Same with your lymphocytes, no. So the lymphocytes are more against your viral and intracellular na mga kalaban, no. Next is your platelets. Your platelets are I don't know bitaw ano bitaw siya thrombocytes, but your platelets are just part of your megakaryocyte mo, no. So in your bone marrow, the largest cell in your bone marrow is your megakaryocyte. Why is it so large? Because it undergoes endomitosis. What is endomitosis, no? Endomitosis is when you undergo mitosis, but you don't actually produce daughter cells, no? Mudako lang ka, mudako. Sige lang kag mitosis, no? You don't produce daughter cells. So, what will happen is there will be a very multinucleated cell. Dagan kay kag nucleus, yung daw kay kag cytoplasm, no? So, what will happen, this megakaryocyte, not seen in ano na siya, circulation, there is kanang mga, meron na siya budding sa iyang cytoplasm. And in those buds, it will fill up with katong mga granules and mga compounds for clotting, no? And then eventually, it will just bud off. That's your platelets na. They are just cytoplasmic processes or projections from your megakaryocyte, no? So that's all. Hopefully naramay na to, ano. And then if you have any questions, feel free to PM me lang. And wala rin mo ko'y problema. So thank you guys. God bless. Stay safe.